Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Searching for Political Identity. I am your host, Brian Escow. Great, as always, to be with you. Thank you very much for being here. Before I introduce this episode and tell you a little bit about my guest and what we talked about, I first want to give a very quick update on my activities on X. As you might know, I have been growing a lot exponentially compared to my previous rates of growth for the 3 years I was on X. A few weeks ago, maybe a month and a half ago at this point, I announced that I am voting for Trump. I did episode 165 of the podcast. I explained the decision. And when I announced on Twitter, all of a sudden I started growing because finally I'd come off the fence, at least in terms of what I'm going to do in this election. And it's been really interesting. It's been great. I became monetized. I'm making some money and I'm milking it. Let's be real. I'm freaking milking it by reposting some similarly worded tweets and just every different way to say this is the conclusion I've reached. But the reason it's not grifting, yes, I'm milking it, and I've now commercialized this process, which I can talk about. I'd be happy to talk about. But let's just say I acknowledge that, and it never was a commercial endeavor. So it's different, and something has changed. I agree, but it's not grifting because that's how I feel. It's how I feel. So yeah, I need to be careful that I don't become a grifter. But for now, I just say, look, I'm milking it because it's amazing. It's opportunities are opening up, and it's how I really feel. So why fight it? It's complicated, it's messy, but it's not logically inconsistent, and it's not immoral. And so I feel good about it on balance. But I got to say, the friction comes from some family members. You get a little tension, but I think in time they will see that my heart is still pure and I'm still me, still a good person. So that's what's going on with the Trump support. But so I'm riding that wave and having a lot of fun with it and making some money on X. But I still have a lot of doubters on X, and for good reason, because despite the fact that I'm saying all this assertive, supportive Trump stuff, every once in a while, like one out of every 20 tweets will be like, wait a minute, I never really did a deep dive into the fake electors scheme or the alternative electors legal theory regarding the 2020 election. And so that is the big one. That is the big reason, if there ever was going to be one, why I would have been, in my mind, at least truly justified in continuing to not support Trump. So I should address it, and I should have addressed it before I made the decision. And so my point is to say that I have been challenged by a longtime follower of mine who is a Harris supporter to do a deep dive on that issue. And so I'm planning to do that. Right now, it's Sunday the 29th. On Wednesday, my next episode, I plan between now and then, I have a lot of research to do, and I'm going to do as best I can, discussion, analysis of that whole situation and whether or not it's going to impact my decision. And newsflash, and I guess you can now call me a grifter if I'm saying the outcome's predetermined and I'm going to be continuing to support Trump anyway. But because newsflash, I'm not going to change my mind. But I'll defend against the grifter accusation there too, even by saying, look, I paid attention to the news. I pay attention. I experienced it live. I was in law school at the time, very busy and working, and not minutely following. Like my dad, for example, he read the Mueller report. He read all these things. So I'm just following broad strokes in the news. I followed it, and although I wasn't comfortable with it, it's not going to be a bar to me. It's good. All the extraordinary things that have gone on in the last few years and all the extraordinarily unfair things that Trump had to deal with, in my opinion. I newsflash, I think the episode is going to basically be me saying, and I'm not done doing the research for it yet, so it might not be this way, but I predict that it's going to be something along the lines of, hey, what he did was a historical challenge, and maybe it was outrageous. And by the way, maybe I'll come to the conclusion that it was not outrageous. But even if I do, assuming that, I will say, it was outrageous, because that's how I thought in the time, swallowing the media narrative. I said, well, this is outrageous. But I've also always felt like the media was outrageous, the way they treated him during his first term. COVID was outrageous. The suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, the Russian disinformation narrative. So many reasons to say that Trump was a victim of outrageous behavior as well. I'm going to say, look, I'm calling it a draw. I'm calling it even. And I'm not going to let that be a bar to me supporting it. Now, again, watch episode 165 if you want to hear my full rationale of how I got here. But long story short, it's a combination of Biden's results, the awful process to arrive at inserting Harris into the race, The fact that my favorite candidate of the cycle, Kennedy, eventually endorsed Trump, the fact that I think Trump has been treated unfairly, all of that, that's the short version of why. There are other reasons too, but that's basically the long and the short of it. So I just wanted to comment on the dynamic on my X account and why people have some good reason to question not my authenticity, but nor my sanity, but okay, Brian, are you really all in? And the answer is I am, but I do need to, as a rite of passage, do this deep dive into the stolen election, alternate electors, fake electors scheme situation before I can move forward with a clear conscience. So I am planning to do that on Wednesday. Next up, after Wednesday, I have a few shows back to back. The following day, I have a guy running for Congress. I don't have him in front of me. What exactly? I think just a House seat. Yeah, a House seat. But he's a brilliant. I've had many libertarians, and I just actually had the guest I'm about to introduce is a libertarian. But this guy's a really heavy hitter. So I'm really looking forward. I've been meaning to talk to him for many months now. Michael White. I think Michael White for all. I think it's like MW, the number 4, Arkansas is his handle. Great guy, very smart. So really looking forward to talking to him about libertarian philosophy. The next guest after that is another fun one. It's a random account that I interacted with who wants to talk to me about illegal immigration and outer space aliens. So I'm always up for a good time. So that's Friday next week. Then on October 6th, which I think is next Sunday, a week from today, if I'm not mistaken, I have part 2 of this conversation that I started with one of the 2 authors of this book. It's over there somewhere. My Brother's Keeper, The Complicated Relationship Between American Jews and Israel. I had read half the book when I interviewed, both authors are named Guy, 2 guys. I interviewed one guy when I had read half the book. We had a great conversation. I think it's episode 163 or something like that. But it was about what it means to be Jewish. And then I've now completed the book, and so I'm going to have both of them on for a complete conversation about the relationship between American Jews and Israeli Jews and Israel, but also the relationship between American Jews and the Democratic Party. That's going to be really relevant to my journey and my search for political identity. And then after that, on October 22nd, I have 2 guests who have been on previously. I'm going to do my first 3-way podcast because what it is Herbie K, who's been on my show like 10 times, great guy, another libertarian anarcho-capitalist, always entertaining, stimulating, and fun and educational. Love having him on the show. He heard an episode I did recently with another Twitter follower, a hardcore Democrat, very informed, very rational Democrat named John Bogley, who said, "Hey, I know you're on the Trump train now, but let me try to talk you off the ledge." Had John on. He did a great job, but he didn't succeed in his goal. Herb reached out to me and said, "Hey, I like this guy, John. He's dead wrong on economics and basically everything, but I like his approach. And how about, Brian, we do a 3-way conversation where John is the Democrat, you're the new Trump supporter, and I'll be the third party guy. And now what makes Herb different than your typical libertarian, excuse me one second, libertarian anarcho-capitalist is that he, having spent 6 years in jail for financial crimes that he completely acknowledges were a result of his terrible decisions and immorality and lack of self-control, and he admits he did the time, he did the crime. But while he was in prison, he wrote many things, wrote many books, including a manifesto called Anti-Politism. And the kernel within anti-politism is called, no, the book is called A Radical Reset. The kernel in it is anti-politism. And anti-politism is his proposal, his vision for American politics. Get rid of the elections, do selections, go to a qualified lottery system where certain people are qualified to be in the lottery for the House and so higher threshold of qualifications for the Senate, do ping pong balls live on TV. Very interesting. So we are going to talk it out. That should be a fun conversation. So yeah, that's where I'm at, guys. It's new waters for me, new territory. Like I've been saying, I've this is a plot point. I've crossed a plot point. I've decided I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, um, and things are changing as a result of that. Now, and I'm embracing it, and I'm embracing the change and growing. So the podcast is growing, the Twitter, the X account's growing, and I'm growing. And that's about all I've got to say for the moment. So thank you again for being here, and a word or two on my guest that I'm now going to let you hear the conversation that we just had. Gov, he goes by Gov. He's got 93,000 followers on X. He reached out to me. He's a new friend, a new follower. You know, one of my newbies as a result of my embrace of Trump. He's found my account, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to talk to you about uh, global politics, communism, progressivism, libertarianism. Basically, have a similar conversation that I've been having all these years." But he does a great job on X. He's very direct. He's very firm in his view. He's clearly a smart man. And that's why I decided to have him on. And it was a great conversation. What did we talk about? Well, hodgepodge, but mostly um, central banks and how they're the chief evil. They and the politicians who enable them are the chief evil, but ultimately that the people have the power, and we must take the power back, make informed decisions, educate ourselves, so we can be mad at the central banks, we can be mad at the corporations that are parasites of the central bank, and we can be mad at the enabling politicians. But once we get mad at ourselves and take action, that's when we can take the power back. That's kind of the vibe of the conversation. Um, why progressivism is not good. We touched upon that a little bit. I would have liked to talk about it more, but clearly, I know his vibe. It's you can listen and read between the lines on why he thinks it's bad. Interestingly, when we stopped recording and we had a little post episode chat, it got interesting. We talked about aliens. We talked about nature and how he believes human beings weren't supposed to be cooped up and we should be connecting with nature. I said, dude, well, now you sound like a progressive. I turned the freaking mic off. And he goes, so interesting. Interesting. And the point being that this left right dichotomy, you'll hear this from any libertarian, any anarcho capitalist. It's a false dichotomy. It's all meant to divide. And there are lots of through lines between people on the left and people on the right. And wanting to connect with nature and not be overworked is one of them. Of course, it's a difference of opinion on how to get to that um, situation. But in terms of economics, um, he's very hard right. And so that's who I had on. So uh, Governor Corruption, the government is corrupt, something like that. That's his handle. I'll post it in the show notes. But it was a great chat, and appreciate his time, and appreciate your time. And I will see you next week, probably on Wednesday, for my fake electors solo episode, rite of passage before I can go all in mentally and spiritually on my Trump support. Got to exercise that demon, and then on to the other episodes that I've already told you about. So appreciate it. Searching for political identity is growing, and there are pains coming with growing, but it feels right. And so I'm going to keep going. Thanks, guys. All right, Gov, welcome, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on. I've been following you for a little bit, and saw that you've been posting a lot more about U.S. politics. I'm in Canada here, but we really focus, and we're kind of inundated with U.S. politics. That's generally most of what we get here. So interesting to see your gravitation from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. So I just figured I'd give you a shout out to maybe we could have a dialogue or a quick chat about the geopolitical spectrum, things that are going on, things that are affecting your country, things that are affecting my country, and just really start a dialogue here.
I would love that. I mean, that's what I set out to do with this podcast. And thank you so much. I'm so honored that we've been engaging, and I would love to do that. And let's do it. Yes, and I have been drifting. Gravitating is a beautiful word, from the left to the right and into Trump's arms. So we'll get into all of that and everything that you just laid out. But I want to first start by asking just a little bit about you. Your page, you got a lot of followers. How is very interesting. How long did it take to accumulate the 93 something thousand followers you have? Tell me a little bit about your activity on X.
Well, I started on X January 2022. I was kicked off of Facebook for my views. I was on Facebook for a while. Never really was there to grow a platform or a following. I was just there in the comment section of news articles, and it got to the point where I was banned from basically every news organization on Facebook. And then every time I would just post a comment, I would get a 30-day ban. So 2021, I think I was on Facebook for a total of 3 weeks out of the year. So I'm like, this is dumb. I started an X account, or a Twitter account back then, and it was just around the time of the Freedom Convoy, and my libertarian views, my views about anti-government, anti-state. It really started to gain traction while this movement was happening. While everybody was converging on Ottawa, and I'm sure that you in the United States are well aware of what happened in January and February of 2022 in Canada.
Yeah, tell me about it. But it was the declaration of emergency powers and freezing people's bank accounts, stuff like that. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so what happened was the government shut. Okay, we're gonna have to pause here. I'm getting feedback.
So the convoy, is that what you were saying?
Yeah, so basically the whole thing started with the COVID lockdowns, and I live in Quebec, some of the most draconian lockdowns in North America. We were in lockdown for 666 days. I remember that specifically because of the number 666. We had curfews. As an unvaccinated person, I was not allowed to go to anywhere other than the grocery store or the gas station. Was really not allowed to participate in the economy whatsoever. And after 8 p.m., not allowed to go outside under fear of ticketing or arrest. And I guess the government started going after the international border, the Canada-United States border, which pissed a lot of the international truckers off, crossing back and forth across the border, which started their movement basically to converge onto Ottawa. And it was one of the I believe it was the largest convoy in Canadian history, probably in the top 5 in the world. And I do believe it was one of the most successful and peaceful protests that was ever pulled off. And it inspired a global movement, and moved to Australia, and moved to Europe. So it was really successful. And I'm not too sure what sort of coverage or how it was portrayed in the U.S. news, but in Canadian news, it was basically portrayed how the U.S. portrayed the January 6th. Insurrectionists, terrorists, overthrowing the government, causing violence, wreaking havoc, and none of that was true. It was people were bringing their families. There were bouncy castles set up. There were hot tubs set up. We were feeding the homeless, and it was just a true sense of patriotism, to the point where I guess our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau really didn't know how to react. So he tucked and ran to his cottage, and then we didn't hear from him for a few days. And I guess he got a call from the White House saying, you need to smarten up and, get your shit together. That is when he declared the Emergency Measures Act, the EMA, and, used the power of the police to come in, stomp on the rights and freedoms of the protesters, throw them in jail, and literally trample them by horseback. So the protest, or I guess you can say the occupation, if you want to use that word, it lasted for a couple of weeks, and then the whole cleanup at the cleanup in the eyes of the state, it took a few days. and there were agent provocateurs that were involved, planting evidence, trying to incite violence. There was issues in Alberta at the border crossing called Coots, where again planting evidence, and 4 people were detained and in remand. So I'm not too sure if we're familiar with remand, but it's not quite jail. It's kind of like no man's land. So they were in remand for almost 2.5 years.
Mm.
Under charges of attempted murder of a police officer. Again, completely fabricated. They fabricated the evidence. They planted firearms and took a picture of it, a photo op, saying, "Oh, look at all these brand new firearms that don't even have a scratch on them, that's never been used, that we confiscated from these insurrectionists." Um, so, I'm sure you're familiar with, what happens in a totalitarian state. Embarrassment is basically a crime. And so
Mm.
these people were charged with embarrassing the government. And, every other charge on top of that was just trumped up. It was, fabricated out of the minds of authoritarians. But, back to my story, these people that were in remand, they finally, 2 of the 4 got, released. I guess they cut a deal. The other 2 were just recently sentenced to another 2 or 3 years in prison, all under the pretense of, wanting to, push back against the tyrannical policies of the federal government. And me, from where I stand, or from my point of view, I was posting videos, posting content, tweeting about this the whole way through, from a freedom and individualism point of view. And that is kind of how I managed to gain a name in Canada, gain a following in Canada. So after a year, I had 25,000 followers. After 2 years, I was up to 60, and I'm just approaching my third year now. I guess it would be in January of 2025. And I'm basically at about 100,000, so 95 right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Steady growth. So I found that when you have something to say, this is an obvious point, I guess, but you can't grow until you have something to say. And I'm just starting to come out of my shell and develop a sense, an opinion. But you have a strong. So I guess I want to ask. Well, first of all, what was the point of the convoy? Just so I'm clear, was it just a rebel yell against COVID lockdowns? Did it have specific demands? What is there any room to say that it could be interpreted as an unhealthy manifestation of all the anger about the government? What was the point of it?
So the original point was the truckers. They felt that their livelihoods were being threatened by the government by mandating or mandatory vaccinations for cross border trucking. So that was the initial start of it, and so they created this movement. And I guess everybody that uh, felt subjugated, felt like their freedoms and their liberties were being trampled on. They really resonated with the movement, and they followed suit. And so it originally started about a cross border trucking, and it grew into this movement of anti-lockdown, anti-masking, anti-mandatory vaccination policies. And within 2 weeks of this happening, public perception really changed. And they always say that they were following the science, but the only science they're following is the science of public opinion. And as public opinion really started to change, that's when you saw a couple weeks later, mask mandates and vaccine mandates really start to fall across the provinces. So it really brought awareness, and it was highly effective in what it did. It was just unfortunate that the government came down with the full force of its boot to squash it.
Interesting. So you seem to have a pretty hardened sense of the world. I don't use that word negatively. You have a firm sense of how you view the world. And that's what I'm looking for. That's what my podcast is and what my search is. For me, it started in law school, shifting to the right by virtue of that education, and then studying critical race theory in my final year, even more so during the pandemic, during the Trump mania. And so I'm searching for political identity. How did you get yours? When did it firm up?
So I guess you can go back to when I was like 16 or whatnot, and I got my first job, and I was calculating in my mind how much money I was going to make, and then I got my paycheck, and I'm like, well, this is a total scam.
Mm.
I lost all of this to taxation.
Mm.
So then and this was right around, I guess it was right around the time of the 2008 crisis hadn't started yet. This is about 2004, 2005. So I guess I was at that point where you are right now. Started really diving into things, and came across people like Peter Schiff, and people like Ron Paul, and it
Mm-hmm.
was it was really Ron Paul that woke me up to the libertarianism side. So not even the conservative side, but freedom, liberty, individualism. And then I started looking into the monetary history, monetary policy, understanding how money works, understanding how the stock market works, understanding how the central banking system works, and then the crash of 2008 happened, and I was following Ron Paul through his career, and I believe it was in 2008 where he was, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was 2008. He was going up against Obama, but he was fighting Mitt Romney for the Republican nominee, and he was filling stadiums. People were really interested to hear what he had to say, and Mitt Romney couldn't even fill a Denny's at breakfast time.
Mm.
But the Republicans bent the knee, and basically stole what was rightfully Ron Paul and gave it to to Mitt Romney, who went on and lost to Obama. And at that point, that was the point in time where I said, okay, both parties are corrupt. Both parties are
Mm-hmm.
playing for the same team, and
Right.
and the team is the international banking cartel.
That's amazing because that precedes really me paying attention. Well, 2008 was my first time to vote, and so I certainly wasn't paying attention closely as an educated, rational adult. And but you could see how since then that process has just repeated itself over and over, where the populist candidate gets nipped out.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And it was really my understanding of Wall Street. And I predicted, this was in 2015. I predicted Trump would win a year before he won, and everybody said, "No, it's never going to happen. He can't win." Right up until even CNN was doing polls a week before, and they're like, well, Trump has no chance of winning, and of course he won.
Mm-hmm.
And I predicted that Joe Biden would win again. It wasn't a year before, but it was June of I guess it would be 2019. I said, no, sorry, it might have been 2020, June of 2020. I said Joe Biden is going to win, and all I had to do was look at the stock market. The stock market was ripping to the upside. And Joe Biden was was basically giving a signal to Wall Street, and Wall Street was really resonating with that. So talk about election fraud and whatnot, and how he managed to end up getting in and becoming the president.
I do want to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, obviously, every election is rigged, and it's not the people that cast the vote that really matters. It's the people that count the vote. And so, but at the end of the day, Wall Street dictates who is going to win and lose. Wall Street runs America. The banks run Wall Street. The banks run the world.
Why will
So
they abandon Trump?
your guess is as good as mine. My theory is that the Democrats are a lot more liberal when it comes to bailouts, giving money to the poor, giving money to the needy, giving money, helping people here, helping people there. And we know the government really has no money of its own, so all it has to do is borrow and go in further into debt. So the further into debt the government goes, the more beneficial it is for the banking system. So at the end of the day, it would be more profitable to allow a candidate that is more liberal when it comes to handing out money, as opposed to an individual or a party that would say,
So this is interesting.
no, nothing.
So I don't mean to fast forward, because I want, if you were on a narrative track, I want to make sure you didn't lose it. But real quick, it seems like you're suggesting that communism and the international banking system are symbiotic, in a symbiotic relationship.
Well, see, communism is, where government really controls the means of production, right?
Right. So I'm being very lazy and inaccurate with my phrasing, but progressivism, shall I say, where the handouts, the government paying for things and leading ultimately maybe to communism, this is part of the banking system's plan.
So what I have a problem with is, the universities, professors, they like to put communism on one side of the political spectrum and fascism, completely on the other side. But it's kind of like a communal-fascist relationship, because the central banking system is a private system, right? And this private system is funding the government. So it's it's sort of like, and so this is what really they don't really understand in university professors, how this system can come to be when they're supposed to be diabolically opposed, right? They're supposed to be on two completely opposite sides of the spectrum. But communism and fascism, they really have a lot in common. They're both work on authoritarianism. They both work on collectivism. But the only real difference here is who controls the means of production. In fascism, it's the corporations, and in communism, it's the government. But so you can have a system where the corporations are in control. And the corporations fund the government, and the government is dictating to the people. So it is like, so globalism is basically the worst of communism and the worst of fascism, put together. And that is ultimately the system that we're dealing with here, the ultimate worst of authoritarian or totalitarian systems that have kind of merged together to create this Frankenstein sort of beast. And to answer your question, a long answer of it is yes, because it's not about, at this point in the stage of the game, it's not about, accumulating wealth and becoming the richest person, alive, or the richest family alive, because you already control the means of creating the currency. You can create currency out of thin air. At this point in the game, it's about being able to control entire countries and entire populations, and entire societies. So if you can, impoverish society through big government, the bigger government grows, the more wealth redistribution is required from taking from one group of people to give to another, which ultimately makes more and more people poorer and poorer and poorer, which they demand more and more help from the government. It eviscerates the middle class. It creates a two-tier neo-feudal system of haves and have-nots. So you have the upper 1% dictating and controlling, while the other 99% have a choice of which breadline they want to line up in.
And this is a result of what specific policies? Just inflation, and just so I'm tracking.
Well, so inflation, again, many people have many different definitions of inflation. To me, inflation is the direct loss of purchasing power. So as you increase the supply of currency in the system, where there is no real demand that is following suit, your purchasing power, or the amount of money that the amount of goods and services that currency could buy, becomes less and less and less.
Is that the main tool of
that's
that?
that's the main tool. That's the main tool.
So
That is,
so I'm right to focus on that.
yeah, that is the primary tool. And if you take a look at Bretton Woods was ended in 1971. You know, everybody I'm sure is familiar with the Nixon shock, where he ended the system where the United States dollar was backed by gold 40% and became completely fiat. Fiat is, basically nothing but built on confidence. It's a Ponzi scheme. If you take a look at US government debt from 1971, it's gone parabolic. If you take a look at any country's debt, it's gone parabolic. And so this is the mechanism that they use to transfer wealth from wage earners to asset holders. And who are the wage earners? They're generally your lower and middle income earners, right? So the people who go to work, people get a paycheck. And who are your asset holders? There are your the people that owns the stocks, people that own real estate, people that own hard assets. These are the people that benefit the most from these policies, as under a wealth transfer. And if you take a look at COVID, and a lot of people will talk about it was a health crisis, this and that, but health crisis or not, health crisis was just a disguise or a cloak that they used, because it was the largest transfer of wealth in history from the people to the upper echelon of society. And they did it by increasing currency supply while the demand for that currency collapsed, so there was no real demand. All that increased currency supply went into assets. While people's paychecks, they didn't really keep up with the rate of inflation. The cost of goods and services went up. They could no longer afford things. They asked for government handouts. Well, everybody that was holding, stocks or real estate or anything of value that can't be printed out of thin air were really the beneficiaries of it. So, this mechanism has been going on for a very long time, and it is their primary tool to rob the middle class blind and transfer their wealth to the haves, and again leading that two-tier near feudal system of haves and have-nots.
It's interesting. I want to go back in a second to this concept of there being an insidious plot against the middle class, because that's so diabolical and it's hard to wrap our heads around. But related to that is this idea you mentioned earlier about the problem we're facing as individuals who believe in freedom. I know it sounds cheesy and corny to say, but is this Frankenstein monster of the worst of communism and the worst of fascism, and that makes it confusing for people to diagnose the problem. And so it's interesting how the left will say the corporations are the problem, and the right will say, it's the government that's the problem. I guess the point is that it's a merger of the two, like you said, elements of both fascism and communism. So the chief enemy here is the banking system.
Well, the chief enemy is actually the people. The people that allow this through what's called ideological subversion, and people that are blindly obedient to the government that allows this process to happen. People that demand more government help, demand
Now, hold on.
all.
Before you tell me about ideological subversion, let me just set up for the audience. You sent me a video from a guy named Yuri, and you'll tell me maybe who he is. And he sent me 2-minute clip of it. And in it, he talks about this concept of ideological subversion. And he's talking about how it takes a certain period of time, was it like 25 years or something, to educate a generation. And the point being that is his point that the Soviet Union at the time, or whatever, Russia, had a plan to decapitate intellectually a generation of American people, and they successfully did so, and they indoctrinated them into communism, and it's a bad thing, and that people like my dear, brilliant uncles and my dad, who come from the very far left, and they see it as a righteous battle, right? They're just doing what they feel is right and what they understand. That those people are ideologically captured. What's the deal here?
Yeah, so ideological subversion. The gentleman's name was Yuri Bezmenov, and he was a high-ranking KGB officer who was tasked with demoralizing entire nations. So he was out of India. His goal was to demoralize India, to rob them of their wealth, destroy the middle class. So basically, he got so disgusted with this system that he defected to America. Well, actually, he came to Canada. And he gave this interview in 1982, and he basically, spilled the beans. And it wasn't too much longer after that nobody had ever seen or heard from him again. He was basically disappeared in Niagara Falls. Just to add a little bit of
Intrigue.
intrigue to that. So what he said is ideological subversion. So it's a process that takes a very long time, and it's very slow, and it's divided into 4 stages. The first stage is demoralization. To demoralize a nation, you need about 2, 3, maybe even 4 generations, to educate them, and pump this socialist style way of thinking into their minds. And so one generation passes it off to the next generation. And once you start getting generations passing it off to other generations, then you get more of a tradition. So one generation is demoralizing another generation.
Mm-hmm.
And demoralizing means, we're not sad or anything. We're just stripped of morals. We can no longer differentiate between what is right and what is wrong. What standing up for individual liberty and freedom, how to protect your family, your country, your property. You're no longer able to come to logical conclusions in making decisions that would benefit.
Well, you're trained to think that those are bad instincts, negative instincts that need to be fixed.
Yeah, so it is a very long process. So it started in the 60s. Vietnamese War and whatnot, and 70s, 80s, 90s. By 2000s, America was completely demoralized. The West was completely demoralized. So then to a point where it was overfulfilled. The level of demoralization where people were starting to beg for Big Brother government, and remove them of their rights and remove them of their liberties. And we saw that in 2001 with the Patriot Act and the Freedom Act, which were both anti-patriotic and anti-freedom. These encroaching authoritarian policies that came into the United States. So once you have a demoralized country, then you can start to destabilize it. You destabilize it by 3 key areas. You attack the borders, you attack the military, you attack foreign relations, and you attack the economy. So, this process of attacking the economy has been going on for a very long time. Economy being, free market capitalism. Try to eliminate free market capitalism, try to install a Big Brother government and a benevolent government that is, promises the world. It doesn't even matter if they're going to even deliver it or not. None of that matters. All they have to do is promise and promise and promise to where you get to a point of crisis. And, crisis, it could happen like that. It could, 2-3 weeks, you could be within crisis. COVID was a perfect example of that, where the useful idiots, pushed the nation to a point of crisis where their demand was more government. And the final stage is normalization. And I'm sure you heard this over COVID, the new normal, getting back to normal. That's the 4th stage in the ideological subversion process, and it can happen indefinitely. I mean, and the length of time that you could be in a normalization stage is indefinitely. It's forever. Once you're in normalization, it's never going back. You're never going back to the way it was. So, me watching Yuri Bezmenov ever since 2005, 2006. Once they started throwing out these words, it didn't take really too long, and they shut down the borders and they declared emergency. So it was, I guess, it was late February, early March of 2020, and I said this whole thing is a scam. This whole thing is going to be used to erode civil liberties, destroy people's wealth, and push forward this fascio communist ideology onto the people. And I guess that is exactly what has happened and what has transpired. Everything that has happened since then has been this evil agenda. And again, we can point to the governments, we can point to the banks, we can point to the corporations all we want, and I'm sure they have they should be held to account for their job in this. But the biggest enemy is the people that demanded this. The enablers are always the most dangerous people in a society, because without the enablers, the tyrants wouldn't have any power. So the system knows this, and this is why they go into the educational system. This is why they use these subversive tactics upon the youth, and to brainwash them into believing the the equality and social justice of the left. But what it means in practice is a lot of dead bodies. But they don't tell you that. So once people start to wake up and realize what the dangers of this big brother, Marxist, socialist, communist, whatever ist you want to label it, once they start to wake up and realize, the people that supported it would actually turn out to be the biggest enemies of it. They will become disgusted. They couldn't believe that the stuff they supported turned out to be the way that it is. And that's why the useful idiots, the people that are the biggest supporters of the system, this is why they're always marked for extermination first.
Because why?
Because they're now seen as a threat. Because first they were
once they realize, they become angry.
They become angry and they want to overthrow, and this is a problem. So they're the first ones to be lined up against the wall and shot.
Interesting. So it's interesting you mentioned useful idiots, because I was thinking, surely some of this is naivete, right? The pandemic hit, and certainly there are people in government that likely said, well, this is the direction we seem to be moving, so we got to do this or that, and even though it seems drastic. But I guess your point is that there is this insidious plot against the middle class, and COVID was a haymaker in that fight.
Yeah, even if you want to take it, shrink it down to the micro. We're talking about the macro here, but let's shrink it down to the micro. You take a look at a store, right? You have your stock boys, and you have your cashiers, and you have your managers, and suddenly this pandemic hit, and now we have mask mandates, and now we have vaccine mandates, and now the stock boy or the cashier that has never had any power now has the ability to tell people that they're not welcome here, that they have to leave, that I'm going to call the cops on you. So if we shrink it down to an individualist basis, it was empowering people that had never seen power before. And these types of people that, relished in this power, these were the ones that turned out to be the most dangerous types of people. These were the ones that, actually allowed it to happen and allowed that tyranny to go on for so long, because once they got a taste, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, where, once they got a taste of that ring, my precious, they did not want to give it back. So it's the same thing on a macro scale as it is on an individual scale. Once you empower somebody that has never had any power to give the ability to use force against another person and be told that they're doing right by doing this, and you can apply that across, the entire spectrum. So, people that have never been relevant before, suddenly became relevant, suddenly became experts. And Yuri Bezmenov talked about this. He said people that promoted the agenda would be, or pushed the agenda would be promoted to positions of power through mass media and public opinion manipulation. And people that opposed it or people that pushed back would be, would be deplatformed, would be character assassinated, or executed completely. So we saw a lot of deplatforming. We saw a lot of character assassination against anybody who may have been credible at the time, let's say your Dr. Malone's or your Dr. McCullough's, leading scientists that said, maybe this is not a good idea. They were character assassinated. They were, thrown through the mud, where they had no more credibility. And people that had no understanding, or, very little understanding, or were only in there to promote the agenda, were suddenly seen as credible. They were promoted to positions of power. So that this is how this whole system works. So in the grand scheme of thing, it's not, a bunch of people pulling levers and a bunch of guys in the back room. It's it's basic human instinct. It's the insatiable need and the insatiable want for power, and to subjugate your fellow man while being told it's for the greater good.
Okay, that's interesting. Very interesting. So you don't believe in this, in some of the conspiracies about dark rooms filled with elites?
Well, I'm sure there are. Like, I'm sure there are people, the upper echelon of society that get together and conspire about, how they want to, take over a country, or how they want to destroy a company, or how they want to, do whatever. It's no different to, again, on the micro level, your PTA meetings, where you have a bunch of Karens that get together and try to decide what is best for the school. And any policy that they put forward always gives themselves more power, and it always, limits the power of the school children. It's the same thing on a macro scale.
So you're saying the battle of ideas is very real, and it's very much a good versus evil battle, but it's not necessarily helpful to focus on elite bloodlines and going all the way into conspiracy land. It's enough to say, no, there's good and bad ideas being waged here, and the communism, socialism is on the bad side, and so these are just legitimate human instincts. There's this battle happening, and that freedom and liberty, the traditional American culture, is just good. It's just better.
Individualism is always better than collectivism, and again, it's just a societal pendulum. It may take 200-300 years to swing from one side to the other. America was founded on the idea that the primary reason for the Revolutionary War was because they no longer wanted to have an oppressive central bank. The Bank of England, banned the colonies from being able to create debt-free money, and instantly put the colonies into debt by forcing them to borrow from the Bank of England. So this was the primary spark that caused, the revolution. You can look at, the Boston Tea Party. I believe that was, December 13th, 1771. I can't remember exactly. But, these, a lot of people point to that, but it was, the central bank that they were diabolically opposed to. So they kicked out the central bank. They won the Revolutionary War, kicked out the central bank, and it wasn't, and it was only a couple hundred years, not even a couple of hundred years, 100 some odd years later, the Creature from Jekyll Island was released in, 1913. The Federal Reserve was founded. So, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson. He said that, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. And, you're only 6 generations away from tyranny, because, again, that ideological process where people really lose focus of what the generations prior had to fight for in order to be free, because freedom is never given; it's always taken. The government is never going to grant you more freedom; you have to take it from them. So this is where there are revolutionary wars that spark up over time, is because the people want to take back their rights from the state. So this is my primary view of you're never going to vote. You can't vote your way out of tyranny. It doesn't matter who you vote for. The system is itself is toxic. As long as we live under a system with a central bank that has the ability to create currency out of thin air, to fund all of this, all of these wars, to fund all of these agendas, to push this this ideology, it's never going to change. And so and the thing about it is the time it takes to get to demoralize a population. Yuri was talking, 25, 30, maybe even 40 years. It's the equal and opposite amount of time to get back to a society of liberty and freedom. So even if we were to start the clock right now, it would still take 2 or 3 generations to really change that tide and move it back to a sense of individualism and patriotism. So to your point of, focusing on the bloodlines and, focusing on, a bunch of, psychopathic pedophiles in back rooms trying to dictate how we should live our lives and whatnot. I always try to focus on, again, the individual point. What can I do? Because I can't control what those guys are doing, but I can control 2 things. I can control who I spend my time with, and I can control who I spend my money on. People are always so focused on the vote that they make at the ballot box every 4 or 5 years, depending on what country you live in. But they forget that the vote that you make with your wallet is far more important. And you do that every single day. So are you going to vote for globalism? Are you going to go to your Walmarts or your Costco's or your Best Buys because it's easier? Or you're going to support and your local farmer? Are you going to put your kids into the public education system, the government schools, where they are indoctrinating you with this ideology? Or are you going to put them into a private school or even a homeschool? Or are you going to spend time with your children counterbalancing the ideology that's being pumped into them? So 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Are you going to spend the equal and opposite amount of time trying to re-educate them on what is important, and your trades, working with your hands, the idea of family, all of these things. This is what the key is. It's not going to be like charge the government, overthrow the government, do all this and that. The key is to educate the next generation onto the dangers of what they're being faced with and how we can change to win this war by winning their minds and winning their ideas to align with individualism and freedom, as opposed to collectivism and tyranny.
So is it the case then that these big bad banks, they just operate in a way that's inconsistent with individual liberties? That's the main tension? Individual liberty?
There's so many different types of banks, right? You have your local bank, your co-ops, your I don't know, in the States, your Goldman Sachs, or whatever, your City banks or whatever. But those are your corporate banks. But it's really the upper banks, your central banks, and then your the central bank of the central bank. So you have your Federal Reserve, your ECB, so your European Central Bank. You have in Canada the Canadian the Canadian Central Bank, and then you have the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank of the central bank. And I'm sure you've heard about the WEF, the World Economic Forum. So the WEF could very well be a front for the Bank of International Settlements. So these are the real enemy of humanity. And I believe, again, it was Thomas Jefferson who said that central banks pose more dangers to liberty and freedom than standing armies, by giving the banks the ability to control the supply of currency, first through inflation, which we're seeing, then through deflation, which is coming. The banks and the corporations that orbit them will rob the people of all property until they wake up homeless on the lands that their fathers conquered.
Hmm.
The ability or the power to create currency should be taken from the bankers and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. So, we were warned about this, 200 or 300 years ago, and I'm sure you're familiar with Klaus Schwab saying you will own nothing and be happy. That's just just a really short part of robbed of everything that you have until you wake up homeless. That's Thomas Jefferson said that over 2 centuries ago.
So you think the mechanisms, globalism is the way, excuse me, the way that the central banks do things, achieve their ends?
Yeah, and you know what? You could say it's not all evil people. There could be people that really believe what they're doing is good. They're disillusioned. They really believe that the work they're doing is for the greater good. So we can't all target them as evil people wanting to wipe out humanity, because that's just that's just false. There are probably people that want to do that, but there are a lot of people that really believe that what they were doing is good work. But if you take a look at the easiest way, so there's two real ways to destroy an economy. You can go in and you can, bomb them, and you can, destroy all the buildings, and you can totally eviscerate the area. That's a lot of effort. That's a lot of work. The easier way is to bury them in debt, where they can never pay it back. And then you start to take over that country because you own the debt. So this is the mechanism that these central bankers have done. And I talked about the ending of Bretton Woods and the parabolic rise in debt that the United States had. And so debt is slavery, right? I don't know who the famous person that quoted it, but he said that gold is the money of kings, silver is the money of the people, barter is the money of peasants, and debt is the money of slaves. So even the currency that we're dealing with, it's a unit of debt. It's not backed by anything, and you don't own it. It's lent to you. It has to be paid back to Federal Reserve. It says so right on the top. If you open up a note, it'll say it's property of the Federal Reserve. So you don't own it. It's not yours to begin with. So they bury the entire societies into debt, where they can no longer do anything, and then you have this economic reset, where we go back to an even playing field, and that even playing field isn't trying to bring society back up to where it was, but that even playing field is to eliminate that middle class, where everybody is playing on the same grounds, impoverished. That is the ultimate end game of these policies. Whether the people that are pushing them forward believe it or not, history has shown us that that's where this happens. And
so you do believe ultimately, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but the idea is that there is an ill intent behind this plot.
There are really evil people that are pushing this, and they're controlling the useful idiots that are in government, that are in mass media, that are in academia. And again, it's not like, do this or there'll be trouble, but it's they're controlling them by elevating them into higher positions of power. So when you leave an office in the government, you might end up sitting on the board of directors of some high level corporation where you're making a lot more money, you have a lot more perceived power, because you played ball, right? So there are the evil in this world is very real, and we can't discount that, but not everybody that is playing ball with this is evil. And you mentioned your uncles and your father. They're not evil people, even though they believe in some of these things that that could lead to the destruction of Western society. they're not evil people. So we can probably say that 80%. I'll coin the Pareto principle. 80% of the people truly want to be good people and truly want to do the right thing, and they're controlled by 20% who are insidious, dastardly individuals who take great joy in watching humanity suffer. It's the empathy of the people that really want to do the right thing, that are being manipulated. Empathy is really somebody that's empathetic can be really easily manipulated into doing things, and that is the problem with the left. They claim to be so empathetic and for the greater good, and that's why they're so easily manipulated into doing these things, because they do truly believe that they are helping, and they want to help the homeless, and they want to help.
Oh, absolutely. All they want is all their point is to say, hey, look, the wealthy have gained, and so maybe you can address this argument. The wealthy have gotten wealthier at an accelerating and disproportionate and distorted rate as a result of corruption, and the people have gotten poorer, and therefore the government, which was either involved or complicit or a bystander in the watching it happen, owes it to the people who have been robbed to take care of them economically.
Yeah, and I get that argument, but that's basically asking. So, say if you're in an abusive relationship, and you just got the shit kicked out of you by your spouse, you go to the hospital, and you come back, and then you ask that same person for help. So and so it's Stockholm syndrome on a macro scale.
I guess they would say that no, the government was, if anything, a bystander, because it's those greedy corporations that have done it, and the government's the answer.
Yeah. So but if you take a look at history, how many people has government killed? Democide and genocide is one of the leading causes of unnatural death. Over 250 million people in the last century alone have directly been killed by the state through democide and genocide. The government is not this benevolent entity that is there to help. Again, it's a self-serving parasite. Again, if I like to bring it back to the micro level, that PTA meeting, right? Think of that as the government, where you have a bunch of people that really want to be at the top, or in control of all the other characters. They're all self-serving. So everybody in the government is self-serving. So they don't care about anybody else, but they want to pretend that they do, because there's only two things that a politician cares about. Number one is getting elected, and number two is getting reelected. So everything that they say, 80% of it, again, Pareto principle, is going to be a lie. And even if they are telling the truth, there's no way that they can actually carry through on their promises, because they don't have that much power. They're not the ones in the driver's seats. The ones in the driver's seats are the ones that control the currency. The currency, the money changers. They're the ones that hold the power. There's nothing that the government can do. It doesn't produce anything. All it does is it steals from one group of people to another, punishes. It doesn't stop crime. All it can do is write laws that gives them the ability to use force as a punishment. So there's nothing really that the government can do to make the people whole, because number one, they were implicit in causing that pain to begin with, and number two, even if they did want to, help, I guess pay it forward or pay it back, they're still filled with self-serving people, and the people that are attracted to politics, they're the same people that wanted to be your class president, the egotistical, narcissistic, self-serving psychopath. These are the people that elevate and do very well and it's not just in politics; it's in the corporate world as well. So they looked at characteristic traits of people in power in government, people in high positions of power in corporate America, and people that are in prison. And they all found that the similarities are 30% of the people that
Striking.
are in prison. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's similar. So again, it's human nature.
Mm.
We can all say that we want to help out our fellow man, but at the end of the day, we're always going to put our own interests first, and we should. We should, because
Mm.
in order for a
That's
society.
the question. That's the politically philosoph. That's the question philosophically. Should we?
Yes, absolutely. Because in order for a society to work, in order for it to be, so you have a collective, right? A giant collective. In order for that collective to work, its best is each individual has to do what's best for him or herself. So
Mm-hmm.
every single individual operating in an individualist point of view, making decisions that's best for
Yeah.
them or their self within that collective, where every single person within that collective is making the best decision for them. That is what is going to make that
Yeah.
society, that collective, thrive. But as soon as you get into an idea or a philosophy where, oh, we have to do what's best for someone else, we have to keep
Mm-hmm.
others safe. That's when you start to get people that they say that those with honeyed words that evil minds persuade the mob, great wolves befall the state. That's when you get the empathetic people that are manipulated by the self-serving psychopaths. Then you have the enablers that enable the tyrants, and then you lead to an authoritarian takeover. So
And here I am swimming in all of this milieu, trying to catch a freaking rock and prevent the current from sweeping me away. What is real? What is right? It's so hard to find the truth, then, isn't it?
well, truth is subjective. Truth is there
Is it?
is the
Is
truth.
it?
Well, pardon?
Is it?
Well, it's a philosophical question. So, so the truth is objective, right? Something is either true or it's false. But the perception of truth is where it becomes subjective. So your
Mm,
perception of reality,
mm,
it's based on your, chance, choice, and the influence of others. How you grew up will change your perception of reality, and as your reality changes, your perception of truth and your perception of what is real and what is not will be completely different from somebody who grew up in a different reality, and their version of the truth is completely different from yours. So the perception of truth is subjective based on initial conditions and how people were raised, and that's why you can say something that is you feel is objectively true that someone could call you a liar on, because they feel based on their circumstances is objectively false, even though it's both subjective based on your reality.
yeah, it's amazing. So it's hard to. And so, has the media environment? Have you noticed a substantial change in the media environment the years you've been paying attention to politics?
In media, in terms of mass media, like are you talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah. Like, is it super biased in your opinion, or is it clearly just captured by these central banks?
Well, if you take a look at, in Canada, it's a little bit different. We're not as transparent with, who owns what. But in the United States, you can take a look at, there's 5 companies, 5 major corporations that control all the media in the United States. Your Disney's, I believe it's AT&T, Comcast, Capcom, Turner. I believe Turner is one, but you can take a look at the top shareholders. It's all Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, and BlackRock is basically they're all hedge funds. It's been a conspiracy theory put out there that BlackRock is just the off balance, the black book balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. So
Hmm.
being able to create all this currency out of thin air, funnel it to corporations or hedge funds like your BlackRocks, your Vanguards, your State Streets, give them the ability to buy up all the assets and then control the narrative, where every single media organization is saying the exact same thing.
So that's the relationship between the corporations and the central bank. And so that's, if you take that dynamic as true, that's when I have to say, okay, who is right, the left or the right? And obviously I'm black and whiting it when it might not be that way, but who has the better stance against that dynamic if I take it as true?
Well, again, I believe that the left and right paradigm is a false paradigm. I believe because you take
Right.
your left side and your right side, uh, you're separating it on one axis. We should be separating it on this axis, where it's your authoritarianism on the top and your libertarianism on the bottom. So the question is, are you going to use force against others to push your ideas, or are you just going to laissez-faire and let others do their thing, as long as they're not encroaching or they're not threatening you, and
That's
they're
the
not pushing.
anarcho-capitalist talking.
Correct. They're not pushing their viewpoints. They're not forcing you to do things against your will. So it's not really, to me, it's not really left or right. Are you an authoritarian? Are you going to use force against others, mandate, or make things mandatory, or ban things? Or are you going to take more of a libertarian point of view and just let people hands off, and let people live their lives? So that, I'm probably oversimplifying libertarianism there, but that.
No, not really. Probably. Well, I don't think oversimplifying it, simplifying it. But the progressive, will the cultured progressive, will say, with no, I appreciate those ideas, but with all due respect, the libertarians really are disconnected from reality, and the reality is that the government has a role to play and that people need. It's, I got to admit that I've interviewed a lot of libertarians since starting this podcast, and I've been really attracted to the ideology, and it resonates with me. And you don't want to be insensitive, because I'm so sensitive, and I grew up in the background I grew up in, was indoctrinated to believe in the left way. And I admit that it's compelling, the idea that people should just be allowed to, and must be allowed to, fend for themselves, because that's natural.
Yeah, well, again, if they say, "Oh, I appreciate your ideas on libertarianism, but let's go back to reality," you just have to point out the opposite of libertarianism is authoritarianism.
Yeah.
So you have to point out to,
Yeah.
so what gives you the right to dictate to others how they should live their lives? What gives you that right?
Well, I guess they would say, that's why it's important to win elections and pass laws the right way. Hopefully that's what they would say.
So, in terms of elections, we can take a look at. I haven't done an analysis of the United States, but in Canada, our intelligence agency said every single election, every single government, every single election for the last 5 decades has been rigged. Every single government for the last 5 decades has been compromised. Every single prime minister, every single leader has been, bought and paid for by foreign entities, whether it be China or even NGOs, non-government organizations. So at the end of the day, your vote doesn't matter. The election is just an illusion of choice. Where people can fight over which political party they want to rule over them. Whether it be the Obamas or the Clintons, or throw in the Trumps, whoever. Well, the people that are actually pulling the strings are robbing everybody blind through this process of inflation, or again currency devaluation. So it's just giant theater that to me and this is even past the point of libertarianism. This is getting into the point of anarcho-capitalism, where it's all bread and circuses used to distract people and keep their focus away from what is really happening through this massive transfer of wealth that is going on every single second of every single minute of every single day, that
Right.
is making you poorer. And the poorer you become, the more dependent you are going to be on the state, and the more open you're going to be on wanting the state to help you. And as
Right.
the state grows, as we talked about it before, the only real solution to a growing state is a more impoverished population. So, again, it's putting the cart before the horse, or not being able to see the forest for the trees, because it always leads to short-term relief It's real short-term relief where you get maybe a check in the mail, or you get free healthcare, or you get some free education. But what is the cost to that? And that cost doesn't really come up to maybe 10, 15, or 20 years down
The
the road.
cost is you're still going on that trajectory. You're
Yeah,
still
yeah,
swinging down the wrong road.
yeah, the cost to it, like, and so how a government funds all these programs is they sell bonds, right? So again, a government doesn't have any money of its own, so it sells a bond, and the bond could mature in 20 years, it could mature in 10 years, but it's generally, let's call it 10 or 20 years. So this is how they fund all of their social programs. So when that bill comes due 20 years from now, all the politicians that put forward those policies, they're long gone. They're no longer in government.
Easy job. Good job.
Easy job. And the result is, so now you have all this debt that comes due. The new government in charge says, "Oh, we have to, we have to cover the debt, the promises from, governments, 2 or 3 terms ago, and we have to make a whole bunch of new promises." So all it does is, okay, so we're going to have to, borrow more money to cover all the promises that was already made, and then borrow even more money to make newer promises. And the more money that you borrow, again, the less it becomes, the less value it has, the more expensive life becomes.
You're just circling the drain.
It just comes a negative feedback loop, where it ultimately leads to a currency crisis. The currency goes to zero, and then you have mass riots and violence that sweeps the nation, as where people, there's been a study on this. As soon as food prices rise above 40% of median income, the situation, or the environment for violent revolt becomes more favorable than peaceful slavery. So the United States, I believe it's at about 8 or 10%. It's a little bit higher in Canada. So we have a far ways to go, to see this pain. But more governments have been toppled by the rising food prices than anything else in history. And it's because of all of these promises that have been made to all of these people by politicians that only make these promises because, number one, they want to get elected, number two, they want to get reelected, and they don't understand the economic consequences down the road that these policies are actually going to cause. That leads to the loss of purchasing power and the impoverishment of the people. They rise up, they overthrow the state, and the whole system resets after a bunch of people are killed, and the government claims no responsibility for anything that they did.
Amazing. So is there a relationship between foreign countries? You mentioned foreign countries having, a negative influence on elections in Canada, at least. Is there a relationship? What is the relationship between those foreign countries, our adversaries of the West, and the central banks? Is there one?
See, that's that's a really difficult question. So we can, China has been involved in rigging elections in Canada for a very long time. Many years, and the history of politicians or prime ministers in Canada that cozy up to the Chinese is very, 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 very long. And then there's institutions like the UN. So your non-government organizations, they're also a threat. With your sustainable development goals, and UN 2030, which came after a whole bunch of other UNs, and then there's UN 2050. So again, it's all of these entities. So I like to put it in perspective, like saying that think of all of these massive entities like your China, or your Russia, or your central banks, or your United Nations, or your WEF. Think about it as somebody, think about it as a street where you have a whole bunch of neighbors, right? Everybody is trying to get along with each other. Everybody is gossiping with each other. Who did this and who did that. Then you have some neighbors that are trying to sabotage other neighbors. The relationship at the micro level is the exact same thing as the relationship at the macro level, where you have entities cozying up with entities, other entities trying to sabotage entities, all for their own self-interest, for that organism to survive or to do better than all the other organisms that they're
So it's not
competing against.
necessarily one amorphous mob of evil attacking the West. It's different elements.
Yeah, so like again, if you have a bunch of people and put them in the room together, you're never going to get everybody to agree. You're going to have power struggles. Same thing in a family relationship, right? Where you have siblings bickering against each other, husband and wife bickering against each other. So on the macro scale, each individual family, there's a power struggle between these 13 bloodlines to become the most powerful in that family, and then there's a power struggle within the families to become more powerful than the other families. And again, it's not going to be like, oh, I'm going to pour bleach on your lawn and kill your grass. It's going to be like, oh, I'm going to try and take a country from you. So like the process is the same. But the chips are much higher. So again, you have certain entities like your central banks cozying up to certain countries to inflict harm on other countries, and then you have other countries that you want to try to sabotage. Other countries you want to cozy up to, other entities you want to cozy up to. So it's not black and white. The system is like it's an incredibly complex, well-oiled machine. And when you talk about the leaders of each organization, they're kind of like a spark plug in the engine, right? You can just pull out a spark plug and you can replace the spark plug and put in a new one, but the engine is going to go again. So it's this machine. So it doesn't really matter who is calling the shots. It doesn't really matter who is in charge. Because as you alluded to earlier, the ship is still traveling in that general direction, and you might be able to put somebody in who could change the tides maybe 1 or 2 degrees. But how long does it take to turn a ship around once it's traveling at maximum speed? It could take a very, very, very long time. So we have this trajectory that we're going on, that we've been traveling on for a very long time. It's going to take a long time to turn that ship around to come back. And that's where I talk about the voting at the polls. Sure, you can go vote for your favorite candidate, your favorite political party. Sure, you can get involved into local politics. You can sit on boards and you can try to enact policies that you feel.
But you're not even steering the ship, is the point.
Yeah.
At all. You're not even steering the ship at all. You need to take personal accountability and do your behaviors every day. That's what will maybe steer the ship 1 degree.
Yeah, and educating I can't put this point into focus enough, is educating the next generation. Because it's the next generation. Again, it takes 10, 15, 20, 25 years. So all the work that we're doing today, this conversation that we're having today, it's not going to change anybody's life tomorrow. But the more people that have this conversation, you can change 1 or 2 people's minds, and maybe they can go on and talk to 100 other people, and out of those 100 other people, they might change 1 or 2 people's minds, and then you get sort of a chain reaction where sometime into the future, 5, 10, 15 years from now, you really start to see the fruits of your labor. So it really starts with education of the next generation, education of the dangers of Big Brother, education on the dangers of the welfare state, education on understanding how money works, and teaching them real value. they know that there's 27 different genders, but they can't do basic arithmetic, and don't even ask them what the time on an
Don't ask him
analog.
how to get to 27.
Yeah, or what time is it on an analog clock?
Right.
They won't be able to tell you. So there is going to be a paradigm change, a paradigm shift, because let's be honest, right now the people that produce the most in society get punished the most, and the people that produce the least get rewarded the most. The paradigm shift that's going to happen, it's going to be a flip where these politicians, they offer no real value. They get paid and they do nothing. But your mechanic and your electrician, or your pipe fitter, or the people that are actually the heart of the economy, they don't really get rewarded for their hard work. They're going to be the ones that are going to be able to prosper in society when this paradigm shift happens. So teach the next generation how to rewire a car, or how to fix
Right.
an engine,
Be
or
productive. Teach them to be productive.
Exactly. And that is the real key. Everybody, see, a lot of people, they woke up, and maybe they woke up during COVID, and they're all so excited, and they want to go out and change the world, but it's not going to happen like that. I became aware to this when I was like 16, like I was telling you earlier in the show, and I felt that euphoric sense that I could just go out and tell everybody, hey, look what I learned. You're all of a sudden you're going to agree with me. No, nobody agreed with me. Everybody, everybody disagreed with me. Everybody called me crazy, and I was basically ideologically banned from society, where nobody would even want to talk to me or have a conversation with me, because they thought that my views were so far out there. And I said, how can this be? Like, it just makes so much sense to me. How can nobody see what is going on? So people's awakening happens at different levels in their lives. Some people wake up when in their 10, 15, 20. Some people in their midlife. Some people will never wake up. But this is not going to it's not going to the system isn't going to change tomorrow, no matter how much or how little we do. But if we continue carrying on with these conversations, and reiterating the importance of education, and all the stuff that I talked about earlier, then maybe in 10, 15, 20 years from now, we can give the next generation a better shot than what we had.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I appreciate how in that last answer you basically answered another question I had. I still have one more final question, but which leads perfectly into it. But you addressed why progressivism is bad. You didn't so the bulk of our conversation has been about the fact that there are these central banks, and that they're really the chief evil, and the chief evil is the people also who enable them, and corporations are a part of that. And so that's very interesting. But just in the end, you also made the argument against progressivism, that it rewards laziness, and that it incentivizes the wrong things, and all of that. So my final question for you is basically, what do you think about the fact that I've embraced Trump now? What's your take on Trump? I presume you're going to say, well, yeah, he's clearly the better of the two options, but he's still within that system. He's still, not going to shift that. He's not going to turn the boat around. So what are your thoughts on Trump?
My thoughts on Donald Trump is he's going to be the most entertaining president. So when it comes to entertainment factor, he's the clear winner, and nobody can really argue that. And the amount of drama that's going to come from it is going to be off the charts epic, just like what we saw in 2016 to 2020. But he's not going to push forward policies like Kamala Harris would, which would actually target and punish people. What he will do is basically kick the can another 4 years, or another 8 years, depending on how long he's alive, or even if he gets, because I don't know how old he is now, 74, 75. He's getting up there. So what he'll do,
I think he might even be older than that.
76. I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
What he'll do is try to stop this, communist, takeover, whatever ist you want to call it, takeover, as opposed to what the Democrats would do would be to fully embrace it. And my point of view, and people are gonna might not agree with me with this, and I believe the only way out of this system is through it. And I believe that we haven't really done enough. We haven't fought back against the system enough because we haven't been inflicted with enough pain yet. And it's that pain threshold. So you asked what was the spark that's caused the freedom convoy, and it was that pain threshold. So in order for there to be real change, society has to be inflicted with a lot of pain. And I know that might sound evil to some people, but that's just the way it is. And you might not agree with it. I say I don't agree with it, but that's just the way it is. It's unfortunate that's going to happen, but that's just the way it is. Why is it like that? I don't know. It's human instinct. Look through history. Yeah. That's what happened. People are complacent until
there's a point. It's the personal interest. It takes time for things to be so bad to where you feel, okay, I can no longer take this.
Exactly, and that is when. And you asked me why the convoy was so successful, is because everybody was feeling that pain at the exact same time. When they opened up their front door, they were being punched in the face, and that was what caused society collectively, on an individual basis, to make a decision that was best for them, that benefited the collective. Everybody got out and started this mass protest that really changed the trajectory of the mandates, I believe worldwide, but definitely in Canada. And again, it was the population that was inflicted to so much pain that it became so intolerable that they actually got up and did something. And since then, we kind of went back to sleep, and now we're a bunch of useful idiots up north again. But that is the solution here to our problem. Is the founding fathers, how much pain did they go through? The Revolutionary War, how many people lost their lives to be able to establish one of the most successful countries in history, and it was still is the most successful country, and they managed to keep the communists at bay for over 250 years because of the Declaration, because of the Bill of Rights. And the only thing that really kept the commies at bay is two things: the Second Amendment, which was protected by the First Amendment, and which gave you the Bill of Rights. So if the Second Amendment falls, the First Amendment falls, the Bill of Rights fall, and all your freedoms, all your liberties are gone overnight. Wow. So it's the Second Amendment that has basically kept the commies at bay for, and not just in America, in all Western society, Canada as well, even though we don't have the same amount of gun rights as you do, but it's still, kept the commies at bay for over 250 years. But it's to a point where, there's only so much power that a piece of paper has. It's just a piece of paper, right? You don't really have to follow it anymore. And we're getting to that point where they're going to try to start, taking away your gun rights, trying to, ban certain things, trying to limit certain things, and then try to censor your speech, pass hate speech laws. And again, it doesn't come in, one day where you're at the firing range and you're shooting off your favorite firing arm, and the next day, you have the government knocking on your door, confiscating your weapons. It doesn't work like that. It's boiling frog theory, right? You slowly turn up the temperature over time with little incremental steps, introducing small bills here, small bills. Okay, we'll limit a little bit of this here. We'll limit a little bit of that here. And the people approve and say, okay. And then it's the next, and then it's the next step, and then it's the next step. Till you get to a point 15, 20 years down the road, and then you ask yourself, how the hell did we get this? How did we get to this point? It was because of the last 15 or 20 years that everybody went along with these micro agreements that allowed for this, this totalitarian takeover to actually happen. So again, if we want to hold anybody accountable for why we are here, all we have to do is look in the mirror. And it's easy to blame the government, it's easy to blame the corporations, but if you start pointing your fingers and laying blame, then you're a victim. And if you're a victim, you can no longer
then you can't participate in the process of correcting the ship.
Correct. But if you say, okay, we are the problem, let's lay blame on ourselves. Now we just empowered ourselves to be able to, right the ship and move forward. Every arbitrary separatist, identification, whether it be, age, religion, sex, political affiliation, they're all separatist movements designed to create a controlled society that's utterly malleable in the hands of the few. If the people really understood the power to affect change, this entire manufactured zeitgeist that's preyed upon would collapse.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, Gov, that's a perfect place to leave it for now. And I'd love to have you back if you're ever interested someday. But that's a perfect place to leave it, because that is exactly what started, my discomfort with identity politics, which as a casual observer, I understood to be how the left operates. And then getting into law school and understanding the primacy and importance of property rights to our system. And then the CRT in the final year, which was, and how it was just like everything I just learned in the previous 3 years of law school was part of the problem. Oh my gosh. Exactly. And, meeting the libertarians and getting familiar with anarcho-capitalism and being attracted to it, for you to put a fine point on it at the end there, I really appreciate. The point being that ultimately, whether you want to say it's 13 guys in a room or you don't, the point is there are these forces operating, there are these entities operating, and there are these effects happening, and certain ideologies are helping and that process, and certain ideologies are hurting them. There is a right and a wrong. We are in a battle of ideas, and we are in I think you would say we are at an important time. You'd probably agree with Biden that we are at an inflection point, although you would say we're always traveling on this road and it's never going to be, there's maybe, but you would say, final point, that this is an intense kind of revolutionary time. Should be.
Yeah, and things are not going to get better until they get worse. And again, it's in cycles, and it's the days are always the darkest right before dawn, right? So right when humanity and good is always going to win, but it's only going to be, they're going to wake up at 11 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds right at the last possible time, and that's when we're going to rise up. And then I just want to end on this. Everything works in cycles. In economics, you have you have seasons: winter, spring, summer, and autumn. Same as within economies, and same within in countries and in entire systems that we have. We've gone through spring of the system. We've gone through summer. We're going into the autumn phase. And after autumn, and no, we were in the autumn phase, and we're going into the winter phase. Each season could last, 25 or 30 years, and each season is very, very important. Each season has its own process, right? Spring brings renewal and food, and winter, wipes out everything in order for that renewal process to happen. So, on the micro level, through your seasons through an entire year, or on the macro level, on your seasons through entire countries, we're moving into the winter of this system, where everything is going to get wiped out, but it is an important process in order to welcome spring and rejuvenation and life and growth. And that is what's waiting for us on the other side. We just have to get through winter.
Well, hopefully it won't be too bad, but I know a lot of people who share your point of view think it could get pretty friggin' ugly, and so yikes. But ultimately, to be optimistic, if you survive the riots and the looting and the cannibalism, it's going to be fantastic on the other side.
And just to end on a positive note, with every great crisis comes great opportunity. So more millionaires were made during the Great
Right.
Depression than the subsequent years after. Crisis creates opportunity. So you can either sit back and play victim and let the crisis destroy you, or you can understand what is happening and try to a game of poker, try to play your best hand with the information that you have. So again, it goes down to education, teaching yourself how the system works, how money works, how everything works,
Mm-hmm.
to position yourself to be in most beneficial. Because the crisis is happening now, right? It's been happening for a very long time.
Right.
It's just going to get incrementally worse. So try to position yourself to try to come out on top as we move through winter and then hopefully into the rejuvenational point of spring.
Mm. Perfect, man. It's all about empowerment, education, and take the power back.
That's all it is. It's
Take the
very
power back.
simple.
It's amazing. Thank you very much, Gov. Really appreciate your time.
I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great
I
time
did.
today.
I did. It really did. And I like the way you closed it out for me. It makes me take the power back. You know, that Rage Against the Machine song. It's amazing how these groups that I grew up loving and listening to, always with the left, but it seems like the dynamic has changed so much. But the left and the right, the false dichotomy. So you've given me a lot to think about. Maybe I don't have to be so hard on myself. Maybe there's ways to align with my fellow heroes on the left and my new friends on the right and seeing past the charade altogether. Gov, thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Take care.